health and safety reasons currently being followed in Bridgend County Borough Council will be held virtually with everyone accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Some of you may already be aware that I have a condition called adult onset epilepsy, which occasionally results in me experiencing short absences or mild seizures. On the rare occasions that this may happen in a meeting, you should not be alarmed, and should I, as chair, experience one of these absences, or for that matter have any other technical ICT difficulties during the meeting, it has been agreed that Councillor Freya Bledsoe will step in and take over temporarily as chairperson, and in her absence, then Councillor Ross Pennell-Thomas will step in. During the meeting, please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize any background noise and interference. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the raise hand icon at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting, and please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence. Meryl, would you please announce the apologies for absence which you received? Or Jessica, rather.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Rees-Good, Cabinet Member for Wellbeing and Future Generations, Andrew Thomas, Group Manager, Sports and Physical Activity, but I do understand that the leader, Councillor Hugh David, is in attendance.
Great, welcome to the leader, Hugh David. Thank you very much. Are there any other apologies for absence from members? Councillor Paul Davis.
Just to say, Chair, I believe they meet at 11:30 due to work commitments. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Jane Gebby, Deputy Leader.
It's Claire Marchant here,
Oh,
Chair.
okay.
Please can I give apologies for Laura Kinsey, Head of Children's Social Care.
Thank you very much, Claire. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay, we'll now move to item 2 on the agenda, and that's declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please raise your hand and I will come to you to declare this interest. Councillor Heidi Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I declare a personal interest in item 3? I'm employed by an organisation delivering prevention and wellbeing support in connection with BCBC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. Are there any other members who wish to declare an interest? No? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We'll now move to item 3, and that is the Director of Social Services Annual Report. I would just like to put on the record my and all members' appreciation of all the tireless work of all our frontline social care and wellbeing staff, as well as our third sector partners in delivering services to the most vulnerable people in our county. And while the purpose of scrutiny will inevitably focus on how we improve upon the challenges which have been identified by this report and the Care Inspector for Wales's inspections, we must also not ignore the strengths upon which we can build in the future. Furthermore, while the Care Inspectorate for Wales Performance Evaluation and Inspection of Children's Services is referred to in this report and will inevitably require detailed scrutiny, can I remind members that the purpose of today's substantive item on the agenda is a retrospective examination of the Social Services Directorate in 2021-22, and that the CIW's report on children's services is on the agenda of the Subject Overview Scrutiny Committee 2, which meets to discuss this on September the 15th. So I would kindly request members to bear this in mind to avoid duplication of effort. Before I ask the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing to present the report, the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Social Services and Early Help has indicated that she would like to make some introductory remarks. So I call the Deputy Leader, Councillor Jane Gebby.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Firstly, I'm sure that you've all read the report. I don't want to repeat a lot of the things that are in there, but what I would like to do is commend Claire on her leadership She's very definitely been at the helm, keeping the workforce engaged and informed throughout the challenges we faced at a time when we not only had tragedies across the county borough, but Claire had a personal tragedy herself. In April 2021, when Care Inspectorate Wales inspected our children's services, they were in the main satisfied with the way we discharged our statutory functions, with a few improvements required, which is the norm of any inspectorate. However, by the end of 2021, what became clear to us at Cabinet and at Corporate Management Board, and indeed most cabinets and administrations across Wales, was that we were having major difficulties in the recruitment of social work staff and taking the unprecedented step of declaring a critical incident for children's services. We were significantly reliant on agency staff to deliver our statutory duties in a more timely way, and this factor meant that we were heavily criticised by Care Inspectorate Wales in our latest evaluation, which is going to scrutiny, as you referred to, Chair, on the 15th of September. Along with our action plan to address deficiencies, I informed members in December's full council last year how significant the challenges that we faced were, and I reiterated this in February of this year. And I estimate that it will be at least 3 years before social services across Wales recovers, something which I advised Julie Morgan, the member of the Senedd, and the Deputy Minister for Social Services in recent correspondence. The challenges in workforce issues needs to be addressed pan-Wales, and we are very fortunate to have a very dedicated and committed workforce, with the majority very satisfied with BCBC. Our challenge is recruitment and retention, which our officers have been innovative and proactive with, and I would like to express my thanks to them all. I've talked enough, Chair, so I will leave my director introduce her report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Chair, would you like me to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Claire. Just welcome the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing and to a team of officers to the meeting. And yes, please, Claire, do present your report.
Thank you very much, Chair. For the purpose of the reporting, I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing here in Bridgend. And this is my second annual report, which I'm presenting here for scrutiny this morning, and which will progress to full Cabinet before the end of September. And one of the most important duties of a Statutory Director of Social Services is the development of an annual report. The annual report is set out in a prescribed format by Welsh Government, and it fulfils the duties of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act for the Director, supported by key colleagues. And I would like to pay tribute to both the frontline workforce and also to the senior team in Social Services and Wellbeing. Jackie Davis is here with me this morning, the Head of Adult Social Care, Laura Kinsey, the Head of Children's Social Care, and their management teams, alongside colleagues in prevention and wellbeing who've been tireless in this last year in dealing with the challenges that the year has presented in providing that leadership through to our frontline services. I'd also like to pay tribute to key partners in the County Borough, to our statutory partners in the NHS, in South Wales Police, across the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Regional Safeguarding Board footprint, in Rhondda and Taffermouth, the Tidful County Borough Councils, but critically also to our partners in the third sector and the independent sector, without whom we wouldn't have any success at all in delivering care and support and prevention and wellbeing to colleagues and to the people of Bridgend County Borough Council. As the Deputy Leader has already set out, this last year has been a challenging year for social services and wellbeing, not just in Bridgend, but across the whole of Wales. I think it's important to remember, and sometimes we can forget, that we have lived still for this past year through a COVID pandemic, and that COVID pandemic has impacted particularly on care and support services and on the most vulnerable within our populations. So notwithstanding the challenges in children's social care, which the Deputy Leader has set out and articulated, equally in adult social care, we've experienced significant challenges with increases in the need for care and support. The COVID pandemic has impacted particularly on the level of complexity with which people are present. People have delayed in accessing NHS services. People have been impacted both in terms of their physical and mental health by the extended periods of lockdown. and our care and support providers and those frontline workforce have been fatigued and have been challenged in meeting the level of need which we've experienced in our county borough. Equally, in prevention and wellbeing services, this last year has still experienced significant restrictions at various points in time in terms of access to services, and we've seen a huge amount of innovation and creativity to ensure that people are still able to remain connected and as well as possible while services have been in that recovery phase. And as the Deputy Leader has said, in this last year, we've seen particular tragedies, which I think it was important that this report acknowledged, whilst not going into any detail around it, and equally it still wouldn't be appropriate to go into detail around at the moment as child practice reviews progress. But important that we acknowledge the impact of those tragedies and the impact on the people most directly affected, but also on our workforce who feel very, very deeply the impact when things don't go well for any vulnerable person in our county borough. I think it's important that the report is strength-based, that we acknowledge and we celebrate what we do well, and there is much that is good around Bridgend and around care and support services and prevention and wellbeing in Bridgend. I would particularly highlight, and I've highlighted in the annual report, the fantastic work of prevention and wellbeing services in Bridgend, the partnerships with Halo and Arwen, and our partnership with Barvo, and that direct wellbeing support to people within the county borough, which prevents the escalation of their needs and them requiring statutory social care services in some instances, but for those who do have care and support needs, means that they're able to have their needs met in a holistic way. Some lovely pictures in the report, I think, around swimming with dementia, for example, which shows, you know, even if you've got very challenging medical conditions, that you can have your wellbeing enhanced. Equally, in adult social services, I highlight within my introductory remarks some of those perhaps unsung areas of adult social services, our occupational therapy service, where we've seen fantastic work to practically eliminate waiting lists for OT assessments. This is a frontline service which has continued to operate throughout the last year and has been really successful in providing people with those aids, adaptations, minor works in partnership with Bridgend Care and Repair, which keep people as independent as possible within their own home and again prevent the need for statutory services. I also highlight the work of adult safeguarding and particularly around the work to eliminate waiting lists for the deprivation of liberty safeguard assessments. This is something which is excellent performance in the Welsh context. And it's excellent performance even in our regional safeguarding board, where it's not unusual to see waiting lists for people who are most vulnerable to have those assessments take place. I also highlight what's good within children's services. We've made progress in this last year, sustained improvements in reducing safely the number of care experienced children. As members will know, this has been a priority for Welsh Government from a policy perspective for some significant time. And Care Inspectorate Wales do acknowledge, and I know it's not scrutiny of it now, but in their inspection report, the impact that the Care Experienced Children's team has had since its creation in terms of really developing that ethos around our care experienced children. There has been significant support from across the whole council to social services and wellbeing. I pay tribute to my colleagues in early health services in the Education and Family Support Directorate, without whose support right through from the edge of statutory intervention to the edge of care, we wouldn't have supported and connected so many families throughout the year as we have. And equally, I pay tribute to colleagues corporately in finance who've really taken that time to understand the challenges and pressures we have, and in HR who've worked with us on the challenges that we face in terms of retention and recruitment, which I must advise you is by far the biggest challenge that we face in social services and wellbeing. I would say in common with other sectors, but this is a significant challenge for us. So in terms of children's social care, I think that the report is an honest appraisal of the significant improvements needed. A lot of the analysis that we had done ourselves in advance of the performance evaluation inspection and advised the corporate management board, the cabinet corporate management board of those challenges are set out openly and transparently within the annual report. Particularly the challenges that we experienced, which came to, I suppose, a critical point post-Christmas around our information advice and assistance service based in Ravens Court, and the decisive action that was taken quickly to improve the situation. But that is ongoing work and is reflected in the priorities for 22-23, which are set out within the report. Obviously, it's a detailed report and I could talk to every page of it. I'm not planning to do that, just to give you the headlines in my introductory remarks. And we'll be happy to take questions on any aspect. But what we also attempt to do within the report is to be really clear about the priorities for improvement in this financial year. And obviously that work is progressing. It's really important that we are a organisation and a set of services committed to continuous improvement. And in order to continuously improve, we need to recognise those areas for improvement and have the right resources assigned to deliver. If I may just finalise, because it might be an area where you will be interested in a committee in exploring around the financial implications. There are no direct financial implications for this report, but from both a finance as well as a service perspective, it has never felt so challenging in my extensive experience of colleagues to work in social services and wellbeing. We can see the increased need and complexity, remembering that we've got 10,000 people who contact us each year in both in adult services and children's services, about 5,000 contacts to each service each year, significant level of need in the county borough. We're seeing the impact on our social care providers of cost of living crises and on the people that have care and support needs. And we know that there's a strong relationship between those factors and an increased need for prevention, wellbeing and social care services. We're seeing huge workforce challenges. We're trying to do everything in our gift to be as innovative and creative as possibly can, but we can see the cost of workforce particularly is rising, as well as the cost of service provision. So it's important, and one of my statutory duties is to advise on the resources that are needed for social services and wellbeing in the county borough. For many years, myself and colleagues have been giving you the mantra that you do the right thing, and it's also the most cost-effective course of action. That continues to be the case. But for the first time, we're probably seeing that those unavoidable cost pressures are outweighing the areas where we can make savings and further efficiencies. So the report is here for scrutiny, and we'll be very happy to take all questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I'll now call upon members to ask questions by raising their hands. And as it's such a comprehensive report, it's been decided that we would logically take questions in groups and by page number. And we will be referencing page numbers based on the public document pack to avoid any confusion. So first of all, do members have any questions on the cover report, which are pages 3 to 8 in your packs? Please raise your hand if you have a question or comment. Councillor Simon Griffiths.
Hi, it's not specifically on the cover, but it's on some of the things which may not be in the report, which I think would be useful for us to be able to see. But first of all, I'd like to compliment you on a very, very clear report. And I really like the focus on outcomes, and the challenge from a demand perspective, I think, is extremely clear through the entire report. And so I think that's really fantastic. So thank you for making that so clear. I think the part that I'd like to raise is that clearly, from a social services perspective, staffing is the major part of the cost, and also the delivery of the service. But there are very few measures within the report that would allow us to be able to see the staffing pressures that you're under. For example, I don't think I can see within the report the balance between agency staff and council staff. I don't see the overall cost of people. I don't see the churn of staff that you might be having, and I don't see any sort of breakdown of the different parts of the service and the number of open vacancies in there. And I wonder whether it might be in future reports good to put those key aspects of the service into the report, so that we can be able to see the pressures that you're under from a much more graphic perspective, including graphics, obviously, of those numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Jane or Claire? Can't
Oh,
tell
it's
which
very
one.
definitely me.
I can't tell which one of you are putting their hand up on the
Oh,
screen. I'm
well,
afraid.
I think we'll both answer.
Okay.
But I think what I would like to reassure Simon is, Councillor Griffiths, I am so sorry. I'm so used to calling people by their first names when I have a meeting with them. I think one of the first things that I would like to reiterate is that we will endeavour to answer those questions for you. Off the top of my head, to give you an indication of one of the pressures in IAA, our current figure is a 69% vacancy rate. Whilst we have put some agency staff in there, that's not good practice. We wouldn't like to be reliant on agency staff, but as we mentioned, this is one of those workforce issues that we have. We are reliant on agency staff to deliver our statutory functions, and that is not a position that we want to be in. And I'm sure that Claire will be able to give you much further information than I can, but I think that's just a stark indication of where we are.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Griffiths. It is the most critical challenge we face, so I think it's a good challenge back to us to include more data in the report as we move forward into future years around workforce. Because unless we get the workforce right, we can't deliver on all of the other priorities within the report, which is why it's our very highest priority. There's a number of real, I suppose, pinch points in terms of our workforce capacity challenges. The first is children's social work. We do experience some challenges in adult social work retention and recruitment, but nowhere near on the scale that we're experiencing in children's social work. And particular challenges in the information advice and assistance service, which Councillor Gabby has referred to, and also in our safeguarding localities, albeit one of our safeguarding localities is in a better position than the others. But we're starting to see particular challenges in other teams in children's services as well. Teams where it has traditionally been not so challenging to retain and recruit staff, and that's our 16+ team and our fostering team as well. So across the piece in children's social care, we're experiencing challenges around vacancies, not unusual. For teams to be operating with 50% agency within those teams. The cost pressures around agency, as well as the impact on service, are significant in that we've seen a real inflationary position because of the workforce shortages around people prepared to work in frontline safeguarding roles in children's social care across. The agency rates have been increasing significantly. We've tried within Bridgend to put in place a range of actions to strategically procure our agency workforce through a managed team, which you'll see mentioned in the report around our IAA services, and through offering long-term contracts to try and secure both quality and cost at the right level in our long-term teams. But nonetheless, we're still seeing significant challenges and significant cost inflation around the agency position. In terms of adult services, the significant challenges are in our care and support at home services. Jackie might have the exact figures to hand around that, but we are really been struggling to spike significant activity in both areas to try and recruit and to be innovative and creative. We are struggling to attract people into those care and support at home positions. Jackie, do you want to give any data that you've got on that, or do you want another couple of minutes?
No, that's fine. So at any one time over the last probably about 8 months, we have been around 2,000 hours deficits to what we had pre-pandemic in terms of delivering support at home for individuals. So this is across our in-house service, but more significantly across our private domiciliary agencies as well. And for lots of the reasons that we've talked about, in terms of the ability to recruit into these posts is a significant concern, and been a significant amount of work being done through a pressures group led by our corporate director around that. So that's the current position in domiciliary care.
And I think just to add into some of that sort of analysis really in terms of the position, in terms of turnover, we have seen people leaving, particularly our children's social care team in adult services, in that care and support at home teams. We have quite an ageing demographic in terms of the workforce, so there is turnover and people leaving the workforce. So, you know, really reinforcing some of our strategic efforts around how we work with Bridgend College, how we bring people into these roles from different sectors, and in social work, how we grow our own social workers within Bridgend, which I think give us some hope for the future in the next 2 to 3 years because of the significant investment in growing our own that there has been, but give us some real challenge in the short term, because what we're not seeing across North Wales basis is numbers of people due to qualify for social work degrees who haven't been sponsored by individual local authorities. So we are looking at initiatives such as international recruitment, looking at how we might convert agency workers into permanent workers and what we might need to do around that, as well as having applied in children's social work, some teams, the market supplement policy, and potentially needing to bring forward further market supplement applications into other teams, given the level of challenge we've got in those key areas that we've outlined.
Thank you very much, all. Does anyone else have a question on the cover report?
If I could just make a comment on that, if I could come back, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, Councillor Griffiths.
I think that's all fantastic work, and I think that the processes you're putting in place to put this right are really good. I think I just want to re-emphasise that this report is our statement of Bridgend's status to the external world, especially to the Welsh Government, and I really want us to be very clear with Welsh Government that some of the pressures that you're under are external, around recruitment and around churn. And that we need a message to go into Welsh Government that this is an all Wales problem. I'm sure that you do that, but I think to re-emphasise that in the report would be helpful to us in terms of our outwards positioning, but also to tell Welsh Government where our problems are, or where the fundamental problems are coming from. But thank you very much for that very complete answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Gebby or Claire?
Oh, it's me. I'm quite happy to share the latest correspondence I've sent with the Deputy Minister for Social Services. I'll get that sent round all the committee following this meeting.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Gebby. Are there any other questions on the cover report before we move on to the report itself? Okay, so we now move forward to the Director's introduction, pages 11 to 25. Please indicate if you have a question by raising your hand. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My question is on page 19, and is to highlight the critical incident which was called. Could you give us a bit more information about how this incident was triggered, how the decision was made, and also what the response has been so far? Secondly, then, my question is more about the concept of a critical incident. It would be good to have some perspective about when critical incidents have been called in the past, and how perhaps a little explanation about the mechanism as well. It was called specifically in this case about the performance in the Council's information and advice and assistance service at the start of 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Talk a little bit about the information, advice and assistance service, and I think it's important corporately when we're thinking through processes for us to consider this in the context of the corporate risk register. And on that corporate risk register, there are two significant risks for us as a directorate, which are related to this. One is around safeguarding and failure to fulfil the risk of the failure to fulfil safeguarding responsibilities. And the second is around workforce. And we've already talked in this committee this morning a little around workforce. And when you highlight something as a risk, which we had already highlighted those areas within the corporate risk register, they require a corporate response. And that's the situation that we found ourselves in within the Information Advice and Assistance Service at the start of this calendar year, in that the solutions within the Directorate and were not sufficient in order to mitigate that risk, and so therefore we triggered a process which brought a corporate response. And I think that the critical element of those corporate response were as follows: that we needed to draw on finances over and above the finances available within either the Directorate budgets or Directorate earmarked reserves to secure a workforce, and the workforce that we secured in this instance was a managed team following a procurement process. We needed to draw on support from a workforce perspective from other directorates, and critically for us, the Education and Family Support Directorate includes people who can safely and competently work within children's social care, and that required a corporate decision in order for the ask voluntarily to go out to members of that workforce in order to answer the call, given the challenges that we were facing in that part of the service and being able to deliver statutory duties. Critically for us, I think we needed the leadership, and my leadership of social services from an officer's perspective is indivisible with that of the Chief Executive. We needed the Chief Executive as the head of paid service, and with that corporate responsibility across the Corporate Management Board to be chairing that critical incident. And we needed very strong political leadership alongside officer support in order to work through the significant issues through the leader of council and deputy leader. What triggered this critical incident? We had been seeing increased need and demand coming through into the front door of children's social care. The service had seen a number of members of staff leave the service, which had left caseloads higher than they should have been. The service had been really struggling to secure agency workers to fulfil the work of members of staff through the usual routes of securing agency workers. And then we had COVID and significant sickness in the service. So whilst the service was hugely challenged, when we experienced that significant sickness, it led to a situation where within the usual resources available to the service, they were not able to meet the demand for service coming through into the front door of children's social care. So we acted as a Corporate Management Board quickly and decisively to do that. I'm not sure if there's ever been a critical incident of this nature called within BCBC previously for this type of service issue. Jackie and myself are frequently in similar such scenarios with our health board colleagues around the pressures that they experience hold service, and often we'll see business continuity called for a brief period of time, and we respond to and are part of that response with our whole system colleagues. And I think actually there was probably quite a lot of learning that we had from those type of responses with the health board that we thought we would bring to bear quickly and effectively to put in place those actions to mitigate the significant risk that's set out in the risk register. And the critical incident mechanism, I think, is one that actually has worked well in bringing together the key leaders, ensuring that decisions are made in a very timely way, and in being able to manage our way through a very challenging set of circumstances. As we sit here today, we remain in that critical incident, not because we're still experiencing those challenges operationally in our IAA service as we sit here, but because we want to sustainably exit from the situation that we found ourselves in. So that service, whilst caseloads are now the lowest I think they've ever been in the history of Bridgend within that part of the service, and significant improvements have been made, demand into that service remains very high, and there needs to be a reset of the resource, and a business case is being developed for the end of September. And I'm sure will be subject to scrutiny in order that we've got the right resources going forward for what really is a reset of demand and levels of need coming into the front doors of children's social care. I think just finally, I think there'll be some reflections when we finally exit the critical incident about whether that mechanism has worked as effectively as we need it to be. Critically, when would you call one? For me, the criteria was when we couldn't resolve the matters within the directorate and we needed that wider corporate support and rapid decision making. Is that the right criteria when you're at risk of not meeting a statutory duty. And also, I think some lessons learned as we come through about how you exit a critical incident as well. But we will do those reflections in due course, and I'm sure that that might be something Scrutiny would be interested in scrutinising as well.
Thank you very much, Claire. Councillor Hughes, you content with that reply?
Yes, thank you for that detailed information, Claire. I think some additional reference, possibly to the corporate risk register, would be useful for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thanks very much. I'm just trying. Right, I've got internet issues, so apologies. I've had to come on to my phone for the meeting. I've had to jump off the laptop. I've got two questions that I raised in the pre-meet. I'd like to raise now, but I've expanded on those questions given the information we've been provided by Claire already. So if I could go first of all to the first question, which is on page 20. It says an increase in the number of people contacting our service. And even though we're only going up to page 25, I just want to say that on page 26, it shows children's figures. And whilst the figures are higher than last year, they seem to be lower than the previous years before that. And the title of that report is the number of contacts for children received by statutory social services. So I wondered, is that all contacts? So just for clarification, the increase in the number of people contacting our service, is that all contacts, or have we seen higher contacts in the past, because based on the chart on page 26? And then with that, you touched on the IAA service and the 69% vacancy rate. And it's something I've been raising in the past, particularly with regards to recording of the contacts to this service. And I know it's going to scrutiny on the 15th of September, but as it's been discussed now and raised in this meeting, it'd be remiss of me not to include this. This vacancy rate, the 69%, is that now covered, the 69%, by agency staff? Because I'm conscious we go back to school this week, and are we saying that it's understaffed now? Or have we got agency staff in there to support the children and the schools when they go back tomorrow? So that's my first question, please.
Would you like me to answer, Chair?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Gabby.
The 69% is with, that's a permanent staffing arrangement. The 69% is without the agency staff that we have. So we're all right going back to school. However, what our concern is that the amount of assessments that we're undertaking from those front door original contacts is increasing as well. So we have significant demand going further through the system. That's what our concern is at the minute. It's not just about the permanency of the workforce. I will leave Claire answer, because I know she's just whipped up she's got problems with her laptop this morning. You'll have to excuse us. So she's just found it on Jackie's. Bear with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think that there's two interrelated sort of aspects that we're seeing really. The first year of the pandemic was an atypical year. Contacts were the lowest they've ever been really into children's social care. And we know the reasons for that schools and other settings weren't operating as usual through those periods, and they're a major source of referrals into children's social care. So as contacts in recovered closer to what they would normally be, what we're then seeing is an increase in those contacts, as the Deputy Leader has said, converting into a need for care and support assessments and into a need then for what we call Section 47 inquiries for child protection inquiries to progress. And that's some of the reason for that is, as with other services, I reference people, delaying access in NHS treatment, for people delaying and for referrers delaying in making those referrals into children's social care. You sometimes lose that opportunity, don't you, to get in preventatively to prevent an escalation of need coming through into the service. We've also, as Jackie has just highlighted, been seeing a very significant increase in the number of contacts coming through into adult statutory services. So if we go back to 2017, 18, there were 3,390. That we now saw in this last year 5,458 contacts coming through into adult social care. And so I think you can see a sort of escalation in needed demand across the whole service. In terms of that position around IAA, as the deputy leader has said, we're now operating actually at 50% above what the funded establishment is, with the use of agency workers. That's what's enabled us to get the caseloads to what I would say is a very good level in terms of best practice across the region. When we designed some 5 years ago the IAA service, it was based on around 200 children, 200 cases being open for care and support at any time. We've been operating at sometimes during the last while since that critical incident was called at 600 cases open for care and support assessment. It's come down during the summer, but we think it's going to settle, and we're having some independent support to bring that business case together at around 400 cases that we need to resource at any time. And it's really important that the business case that comes forward is obviously based on robust analysis and data. But I can provide the assurance that the IAA service is now fully staffed, albeit fully staffed with significant agency proportion in terms of that workforce.
Thank you, Councillor Gebby and Claire. Councillor Williams, would you like to come back, or are you content with the response?
Councillor Williams, I think the leader wants to come in. If he...
Sorry, the leader's
leader's there, is he? Okay.
I'm on the edge, apologies.
Councillor Davis.
I'll try and squeeze it in. I just wanted to take the opportunity to make the point around not just the volume of contact and the levels of families and children that we support, but also around the complexity of the needs of those families and children. And it's been recognised across Wales that the complexity of need has grown. So for your typical family, that level of support is much greater that we're providing, and the complexity of need of that family is much greater. And that won't be shown by the figures, because the figures simply show the overall numbers, and perhaps we could think about how that is demonstrated, because it is an important part, isn't it, of the pressures that social services across Wales face, and obviously how we respond to that then as a continued response to that as a service, as a council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for the contribution, Councillor David. Councillor Williams, would you like to come back?
Yes, please, and then I'll ask my second question. I think it's important that we do reflect that in the report. As a governor in 2 schools, I know that the complexity of the cases is greater than it was previously, but the report then doesn't show that. It suggests that we are potentially not having as many cases as we were in 2019-20, 18-19 and 17-18. So I think it would be good to just reflect that, so that everyone is aware of the nature of these referrals that are coming in. If I can go on to my second question then, please. And that was on page 20 again, and it was the second paragraph relating to adult care and the discharging from hospital and the high levels of staff absence in-house. And then Claire touched on her opening statement on Bridgend Care and Repair and how they've supported residents. Now, I've put a number of referrals in, I'm sure lots of people have, with regards to discharges and delays discharging people from hospital because they have to have their house assessed or their house isn't ready. And I just wondered, I sit on Bridgend Care and Repair, and it's only because I sit on them, I know what they do, and I don't think many people and many members know exactly what they do and what they can do to help. So my first part of the question was, are we using them to the full advantage to speed up these discharges from hospital? And then touching on, because Claire touched on the DFGs and the small jobs that are being completed by Bridgend Care and Repair. As a member of the Bridgend Care and Repair Board, I know that the amount of work going to them has significantly declined with the view of taking it all in-house. And if we've said above that we've got high levels of staff absence in-house, are we going to be utilising these more to complete more of DFGs? And how are we doing with the DFGs? What's the turnaround time scale for these, please? That's my
Thank you very
question.
much. Thanks very much, Councillor Williams. Claire, Councillor Gebby.
I think Jackie is going to answer this one, if that's all right, Chair.
Sure, Jackie, over to you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think I can say that our relationship with Care and Repair and the partnership working that we do at an individual person level is excellent, and that we do maximise, and they are very much part of the whole discharge planning within Princess of Wales in terms of what we do. We've recently, Chair, introduced a new discharge hub within Princess of Wales Hospital, and within that hub, Care and Repair sit right alongside our social workers and the discharge liaison service within there. So, you know, very recently we've even strengthened that relationship even further, really. So, yeah, in terms of that. In terms of DFGs, I think I don't know whether I'll hand back to.
Yeah, I think if I may just clarify, I think I was talking about minor adaptations, and that's the contract that we have from Social Services and Wellbeing with Care and Repair, which I think has been renewed in the last year successfully, and is a really successful contract. And obviously, if we can deal with something as a minor adaptation, it's very beneficial, because something doesn't then need to progress to a disabled facilities grant. If I don't like to sue this, but I think disabled facilities grants are outside of my remit as a corporate director and outside of the remit of this annual report, but we can speak very positively about those minor adaptations and that relationship.
The Chair, if I could come in, the change in provision has been around those major disabled facilities grants, and the provision has changed in that that's now delivered on our behalf by Neath Talbot Council. So that's a partnership, and they don't experience staff recruitment retention problems in that specific service area in response to Councillor Williams' point. So I think that's a good point around DFGs, but actually there's a wide range of DFGs, from minor adaptations, which can include just installing a grab rail or a simple ramp, right up into major DFGs, which can be Hulu bathrooms and extensions to properties, and they're very different projects, and we work with a range of partners, don't we, in terms of trying to increase that support, because what we're increasingly seeing is obviously we've got an ageing population, and if we can help people by providing those very simple, short and rapid aids and adaptations to their properties, then we'll do so, and actually the performance around that continues to be very positive, doesn't it? And we work closely with the health board on that as well, and we're continuing to explore ways to make it better in the future.
Thank you. And as a result of Councillor Granville's suggestion as well, disability facilities grants will be on our forward work programme. But Councillor Williams, would you like to come back in before we move on? Or?
Just to say that the information with regards to the discharge hub in the hospital, and I think it would be beneficial for members to have specific information, and also some more information about the Bridgend Care and Repair and how they support, because it might lead to less referrals coming in then as well, because we know that these agencies are there to support as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now. Does anyone else have a comment on this particular section on the director's introduction? Otherwise, I will come in with my set of questions. I'd like to comment on some of the strengths and refer to page 11. The CIW's quality assurance inspection was generally positive about the quality and effectiveness of leadership and partnership. You've mentioned that there are many examples of innovation which have reduced the need for statutory interventions. Is it possible for you to draw out some examples of how you've incorporated best practice from other local authorities to further reduce the need for statutory interventions?
Thank you very much, Chair, for the question. I think in terms of best practice from other authorities, first of all, I'd say there's best practice in Bridgend, which other authorities are frequently very interested in coming to view. I would highlight the integrated teams that we've got, our integrated locality teams for adult services, nationally evaluated, highlighted a couple of years ago now, but in the Health and Social Care Review for Wales as leading edge practice in terms of integration, and people are, are very interested in that. Our partnerships with Halo and Arwen, particularly around areas such as the National Exercise Referral Scheme, the Swimming with Dementia, the Super Ages Bevan Exemplar programme, lots and lots of examples of where practice in Bridgend is at leading edge. Also on the children's social care preventative side, we've got the award-winning, didn't mention it this year because we did last year, Baby in Mind service, which won a social care accolade, and lots of other parts of Wales have been interested in looking at that. We are very outward-looking in terms of other areas of Wales, and just to give a couple of examples of things that we've been reviewing. In the prevention area, we've got our local area coordinators. That model is based on a best practice model, which actually originated in Australia. But there are other parts of Wales where that model was implemented before it was implemented in Bridgend, and that model is perhaps a little bit more progressed because it's across the whole county borough or the whole of an authority area, whereas we've got those local area coordinators in the north. So that's a good area for us to be learning from for good practice. In Jackie's area, we're in constant conversations with other parts of Wales regarding how we address these challenges in terms of whole system working, and particularly care and support at home. So we've been talking to colleagues in Carmarthenshire recently about how they've looked at contracts in their home care services, how they've rolled out electric vehicles within their in-house services, and trying to learn from how they've overcome barriers there. So that's a good example of some work which is very live at the moment. In children's social care, we're implementing, as we set out in the report, the signs of safety model of practice. We've been in lots of conversations with authorities who've taken the decision to implement signs of safety some years ago, to learn from them about what you do and what you don't do, so we can try to not do some of the things that perhaps are unnecessary in terms of that implementation. So through both our links here in Wales, but also links across England particularly, and the UK, we do try and learn from good practice. One of the things that we've invested in our EMRs is an improvement partner, Institute of Public Care, to be working with us on our improvement programme. So they're bringing that research and evidence base to what we do, so that we're best placed really in terms of drawing on that expertise as we address the challenges we face.
Okay, thank you, Claire. And just to build upon that, on page 13, you refer to the difficulty in sustaining quality in the delivery of children's care homes. And you refer to the need to ensure that you have the right operating models. So does this include and encompass the signs of safety shared model of best practice, which you just referred to? And can you explore in more detail what operating models you're considering going forward?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. In terms of provision of social care and children's home, Bridgend again has been at the fore really of investment and capital investment in the development of services. We've got the new hub, which I know you know a lot about, which is at an enhanced stage of development at the moment. But what we're seeing, and we've recently submitted a business case, or a couple of linked business cases to Welsh Government to this end, is the complexity of children requiring residential provision means we need a multi-agency support model, and that's what I mean by the operating model. The bid that we put into Welsh Government includes educational provision and psychology provision, as well as social care, because we recognise that whilst social care can deliver a lot of what's needed to support our children, that we do need to draw on that expertise of other partners. And I think that's some of the learning that we've got within our children's homes in Bridgend. In terms of models of practice, actually the deputy leader is an expert in these areas, given her professional background, but we're implementing trauma-informed practice. There is a role, Science of Safety is a social work practice model, so there is a role there. We need to work through really how we reflect what's within Science of Safety and safety planning, particularly within our direct service provision. So there'll be a relationship there, but it won't be so much about Science of Safety within the direct provision. It'll be making sure we've got the right trauma-informed practice, the right skill set in the workforce, and the right multi-agency support in terms of those care homes.
And if I could just add an additional comment, please, Chair, and that is we are very conscious that our health board colleagues are under pressure, just like we are. I think one of the things that we recognise is the lack of CAMS support, particularly around our children, and the support required. When you look at even our Youth Justice Board, our last inspection, it actually makes reference to the lack of CAMS. And I think whilst we do need that integrated working model, we need to be cognizant of the fact that unless we do this together as an integrated model between health, social care, and even between some of our third sector colleagues, so I would reference Bernardo's or the Tithe Project or something like that, we're not going to be of any benefit to our children. So we need to have a wider holistic view about this, and we need that buy-in from our other agencies as well. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much both for your response. Councillor David, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just on your question, I think it's a good question around looking to the local authorities. So our Baby Mine project, which is an award-winning project, I'm very proud to say we pinched that project off Newport, but we tailored it to Bridgend, and the outcomes are remarkable in terms of the impact that has. So it's a very intensive support programme for parents with newborn children, where we will provide daily visits, help with practical tasks from bottle sterilisation to breastfeeding to contact and seeing an eye contact to the children. And we've seen 87% was the last statistic I've seen of children remaining with those families when it was considered there was a significant risk of that family breaking down and those newborn babies having to be taken into care. But by working very, very intensely, very, very closely, and providing that support to the parents, we're able to keep those children together. And that's why the project won a social Wales accolades award just a few years ago. But we're always on the lookout for that best practice across Wales. Thanks,
Great.
Chair.
Thank you very much for your contributions. It's always important to recognise the strengths which exist, as well as building, as well as addressing some of the challenges. Just moving to page 18 now, just jumping forward. And obviously the CIW identified the need to address the variability in practice, the quality of assurance and management oversight, and how well we hear the voice of the children and families. In the report, you mentioned that an improving outcomes for children board has been established to both improve performance against the 3-year strategic plan, which I believe is a positive step. But we're now 5 months into the next reporting period. What conclusions and recommendations has this board provided, and how have they been implemented to date?
Thank you very much, Chair. The Improving Outcomes Board is chaired by our Chief Executive, Mark Shepherd, and benefits from an independent advisor, Phil Hodgson, who is a former director in England and Wales, and has been appointed by Welsh Government to chair the National Adoption Board for Wales, and also onto improvement boards when ministerial intervention has been required in particular authority areas. So he comes with excellent credentials, and we take to the board progress reports, we take our performance reports, and we take progress reports on the areas within that 3-year plan. And what Phil does for us following each meeting is a formal advice note, setting out his reflections in respect of what we've presented to him. So what's changed already as a consequence of that input? Firstly, our performance reporting. He was, I think it's fair to say, a little critical or saw areas for improvement in the way that we were setting out our performance reporting at the first board meetings, and we've taken on board his advice and his expertise, and have changed quite significantly the performance reporting that we have, and actually the way we look at performance within the directorate as well, because some of the critique from CFW was about management oversight, and effective management oversight is reliant on having the right data and qualitative information at any time. Other areas where we've benefited from Phil's insight to date, we've taken reports to him about the implementation of our science of safety model, and he's provided advice on the plans that we have around that. We've had advice from him around our provider services and our commissioning strategies and placement strategies, and I suppose critically, given it's our most critical area of improvement required around workforce. And so it was Phil's insight, and he had direct experience of this in one of his former authorities that have led us to the implementation of the project around international recruitment, and learning from his insight. We're looking at how to do this successfully. It's not a quick fix, far from it, but as a sustained piece of work, then hopefully alongside other things will have benefit for us here at Bridgend, and Phil's expertise in that area is helping us to develop those plans and to implement them. So those are just a few examples where that board and its construct is having an impact.
Great, thank you for that, Claire. And just to build upon your point about recruitment and retention and some of the staff challenges that we have. On page 20, you mentioned in adult social care, you point to the high levels of staff absence in in-house services. What do you attribute this to? And I think the leader just mentioned a couple of moments ago, but perhaps clarification is needed, that some of our partners or some of our neighbouring local authorities don't have the recruitment and retention issues that we have in BCBC. So can you provide some clarification on that, on workforce retention? Perhaps I've made a mistake there in interpreting what the leader said, but perhaps you can clarify.
Yeah, myself and Jackie can pick up the issues in terms of in-house services and levels of staff absences. The two predominant reasons are musculoskeletal and non-work related stress, and you know there's a lot of work that happens to try and improve that position, but it is a really challenging position for us. We you know work with our colleagues in HR in terms of ensuring for the musculoskeletal reasons that people are getting access to physio, because that's something we could support ourselves if they weren't, but they predominantly are. But there are backlogs, as we know, in people getting the operations and sometimes the appointments they need. Big approach around well-being. We've got our corporate well-being officer, and Stuart provides expert advice to us, as well as you know, support that we've got within the service, where we see particular challenges, and really a very tired workforce, I think, is one of the reflections, given what people have worked through frontline, no working from home at any point during the pandemic, of those who deliver direct care. I'll let the leader come back in terms of the other authorities' position, but I think Jackie wants to add something on adult care. Sorry, Jackie.
Yeah, so in terms of our domiciliary and our care workers, I think there is a number of issues. It's not just one thing that has got us to the position that we're in. And I was recently on a national call with other colleagues, and it's very similar across Wales. So in terms of that, I think for us in Bridgend, there's a couple of things that have contributed to that. There's the employment market in Bridgend and our ability to compete with other organisations to keep our staff. We've tried significant issues around recruitment, and there are a number of issues really in terms of we've got an ageing workforce, we've got a very fatigued workforce, and the level of professionalism that they now, in terms of their registration and the level of needs of individuals, has increased really. And if I'm honest, in some ways the role isn't attractive when you think about the level of responsibilities for some people. So those are just some of the things that we're facing really. Those staff that we have got here are very committed and very dedicated, but they are an ageing workforce for us, and there's a number of initiatives that we're doing in terms of that.
And apologies if I wasn't clear earlier, Chair, but staffing, recruitment and retention is a challenge that every local authority in Wales faces, and certainly the feedback that I receive as spokesperson for health and social care, and I know it's the same through professional networks, through the Association of Directors of Social Services and the Association of Heads of Adults and Children's Social Services, is that those challenges are growing across Wales, because it was an experience that every local authority and every workforce went through. Was COVID was an incredibly difficult period, wasn't it? And no one's had time to draw breath, have they really? They've just come straight out of COVID, where they were under huge pressure, and now we're dealing with record levels of demand, and it is incredibly busy and difficult. And as the head of adult social care has outlined, we also have a competitive labour market still. Whether that remains is to be seen, given the economic turmoil potentially we're about to face. But it is a challenge experience across Wales. That's not to say that we're not constantly looking at different ways of addressing that, whether it's through market supplements, whether it's through regrading pay structures. You will have seen in the director's report that a number of jobs fairs were held. Myself and the deputy leader attended one, for example, and sadly, I think we doubled the turnout there. It was, I think, one person had turned up at that jobs fair, and we held a series of them across the borough. We're also looking at more joint work with health colleagues. I think that's important to report to members in this meeting, and we're thinking about that because we know that for lots of people that badge of the NHS is an attractive badge and status to have, and sadly, and it is very sad that social care colleagues are not always held the esteem of their roles, are not always held as highly as colleagues in the NHS, and that's something we're always trying to battle against. But we are thinking about more innovative ways of recruiting to these roles through having joint roles through our colleagues in the NHS, and we'll be bringing further information back on that to colleagues. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure everyone would echo your sentiments on how our social care workforce are absolutely invaluable. I think we've finished that section now, unless any other member would like to comment. As is always the case during the meetings that I chair, we're only on the director's introduction, and we've gone through an hour and 10 minutes of our session already. So unless anyone's got any further questions, we'll move on to the next section, which is the high-level summary of performance on pages 26 to 32. And we'll take the questions on the children's performance dashboard first, on children's social care, from pages 26 to 28, if anyone has any questions. While members think, I'll provide one comment and a question. Just regarding the significant reduction in the percentage of assessments completed within the statutory timescale, which is 66.61%, down from 95. Can you inform the committee what the statutory timescale is, and then what you attribute this reduction to? Is it just the increase in pressure as a result of the significant increase in contacts, both in children and adult social care?
So thank you very much for the question. The statutory timescale is 42 days. Obviously, there has been an increase in contacts this last year that the report refers to, as I said. I think coming out of 2021, there was huge optimism across services because performance was at an all-time high. But when you really drill down into those levels of performance, because there'd been such a sort of, you know, level of lockdowns and level of you know, services such as schools not being open, then perhaps those performance levels clearly couldn't be sustained at that level. Having said that, we do have concerns that the performance dipped to that level. Those concerns are reflected in the CIW evaluation report. There's a combination of the complexity of the work, and if something's going to take 43 days rather than 42 days, I'd rather it take 43 if the quality is there and it's done in the right way. And sometimes there will be reasons why assessments will take slightly longer than the statutory timescales. But equally, far more assessments should have been completed within in those statutory timescales. The workforce challenges we've alluded to, the challenges in the IAA service have alluded to, and then those cases, a number of them that come through IAA service move into our safeguarding localities. So I wouldn't want the scrutiny committee to have the impression that the IAA challenges were the only challenges we saw during the last year, and indeed continue to see. Obviously, from children's social care perspective, there have been particular pressures, you know, the level of court work, you know, the fact that some of our workforce have been actually called to give witness in criminal trials, you know, all of that impacts, doesn't it, on the performance of the service. So I think the context explains the dip in performance, but there is a key focus on improving both the quantitative and the qualitative performance.
Great. Thank you for providing that context, Claire. Does anyone have any other questions on the children's performance dashboard? Can't see any hands, so therefore we move to the adult performance dashboard on pages 29 to 32, if anyone has any questions. And just a question from me, really, and apologies if I'm being ignorant here, but as a lay person, it's just for clarity in my mind, with regards to the reablement packages, can you just provide a definition between reduce and mitigate the need for support? Because I always thought that mitigate meant reduce, but perhaps it means prevent altogether. So apologies for my ignorance, but I think clarification would be helpful.
Yes, so in terms of, reduce the number of hours, and mitigate is where there's care is no longer needed.
Great, that's an easy answer. Thank you very much, Jackie. Councillor Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chair. On one of the statistics around adults at risk, it describes that inquiries, there are a number of inquiries that are done within the 7-day timescale for completion, but that 55 have last year and this year have not received the information within 7 days. Again, that's not clear whether that means it's delivered in 8 days or weeks or months. So can we have a little bit of context around that and what is being done to increase in line with previous year's achievements, please?
Okay, thank you for the question. So it is within 7 days, and as Claire has said earlier, there are many that are done within 8 to 9 days. But in terms of that, really, I think when we make our inquiries within 7 days, it's not just within the local authority, it's with our partners as well. So a large proportion of our safeguarding referrals include care providers, our health colleagues, and the police, and a number of our other partners, really. So particularly when we were operating in the pandemic, many individuals were carrying out several different roles in different organisations, and we found our ability to coordinate and pull that information together became harder throughout that. I can say that in terms of the 7 days, the large proportion of those 55, and I could get the exact figures, are done within a very short time after the 7 days.
Thank you. That's really clear. It wasn't sure whether those 55 people were the same 55 people from one year to the next, but that's really clear. Thank you very much.
They are different people. Yeah, they are different people. Yeah, no, definitely not.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Are there any other questions on the performance dashboards? Okay, we will move on then to recovery, reset and renewal, the social care recovery plan, and that's pages 33 to 39 of our document packs. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Bennett, that's probably a hand which you haven't removed, is it? Or would you like to come back in?
I have got another question on
Okay,
this section,
yeah,
actually.
please do. Please come in.
It's under trust and confidence, and it talks about the WICIS system, and it's good to know that IT are maintaining this, and that, but there's obviously a heavy reliance on it. But some of the reports that we've seen do emphasise that sometimes the information isn't being put on the systems, and that's causing problems. So again, just asking, you know, how are we ensuring accuracy and that the input of information is on that system very quickly and in a timely way? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Bennett. I'd say three things. I think firstly, in terms of the system itself, we know that nationally there have been challenges. We know that it remains on our corporate risk register in terms of that system, but also we're doing work locally to ensure that we're optimally using that system. So we've set up a WCSIS user group between the Directorate and IT, and that's very important in terms of making sure we're getting the best out of the system that we've got. The second thing, in terms of how we assuring ourselves, quality assurance is really critical in that respect, isn't it? So when inspectors come in and we do our own quality assurance, if it's not written down, if it's not on the system, it didn't happen, because recording is everything. We've got a new recording policy, which we're due to consider at my senior management team next week, and in terms of quality assurance, there's been a major focus on that in children's social care and you know, in adult social care as well. Quality assurance is a key priority. The final area we're seeking to strengthen, and there's been investment by the council around our social work support officer roles. We know when workforce is under huge stress and pressure that we have to ask our workforce quite rightly to prioritise their direct work with children and families, with adults with care and support needs. We know that those authorities that are really successful invest in support officer roles so that professional staff are doing what only they can do, and there's other support within teams. We're in the process at the moment, so if you know anybody who wants to apply for them, A-level students who've been successful but not gone over to university, etc., in recruiting into the first tranche of the social work support officer roles following a consultation with our business support staff. That review to date has covered our safeguarding teams and our IAA service in children's services. It will mean there's one support officer for 4 workers. We need to roll out that review now into the rest of adult services and into the rest of children's services. But I see that as absolutely critical building block, A, in professional staff wanting to work here in Bridgend, and secondly, in terms of the accuracy of the recording and the data on our systems, because they really are the front line in QA around the system within teams.
Thank you. That's really
Thank you very
encouraging.
much, Claire. Thank you, Claire. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Apologies, I had problems trying to put my hand up because I'm trying to use my phone for this meeting as my Wi-Fi keeps going. I just wanted to ask a question, if possible, just going back slightly on percentage of children looked after who've experienced 3 or more placements. The number is quite high, I would say, 12.03%. And again, percentage of children looked after who have experienced 1 or more changes of school is 7.22%. And I was just asking for some clarity as to why these figures are quite high and what we're doing to bring these down. Thanks.
These are really important qualitative indicators for our care experienced children, councillor. So important question. I think in terms of good practice, as you know from my introductory remarks, we've established the care experienced children's team, and that's important because when care experienced children are looked after, children are supported in teams with wider safeguarding responsibilities. Sometimes they're not prioritised for obvious reasons in the way that they are when there's a dedicated team for care experienced children. There's been huge pressures this last year, and indeed continue to be so, around what we call placements, you know, residential placements, fostering placements, And sometimes we will get notice at short period from providers because of the challenges that they're facing. Some of that you'll understand will be the impact of the pandemic. Children have been in school far less during that last year. So if you think about the built-in respite that if you're a residential provider or if you're a carer, that the fact that the child goes to school gives you, the fact that that wasn't in place for the whole of the year will be a significant issue for you. In terms of what we're doing about it, you'll see reference, and we'll have talked before about the reunification workers that we've got in place. So whilst the title of those posts sounds as if the role is all about reunifying with birth families, a lot of the work those workers do is to what we call stabilised placements. And to support perhaps a foster family, to support a residential placement with whatever challenges that they're experiencing at that time for a child not to move on. So that's one of the areas for investment, and we've actually invested in more of those roles to support placement stability. I referred earlier to the proposals that we've made to Welsh Government, which everything crossed will be successful. That's about developing a therapeutic service to support both residential and foster care provision, and more of a support worker role available out of hours for placements in the county borough, again with the aim of that stability and the permanence within placement for as long as possible. Because it's really important to note that those figures relate to unplanned moves. It doesn't take into account a transition which may be planned. So that's when a child has experienced 3 or more breakdowns in placement, which weren't part of their care plan. So it is one for us to be concerned about, and to really do everything we can to reduce those areas.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Amanda Williams, would you like to come back? Or?
Sorry, Chair.
Fine, thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Williams. Do you mind if I comment as well?
Yeah, of course, Councillor Gebby, yes.
Welsh Government direction is that we are now not for profit within children's residential services. One of the reasons that we have so many problems with placements currently is they are handing back contracts. That's not just to us here in BC, but that's across the board in Wales. If they are not going to maintain their market profits, I want to say, then they're not willing to provide a service for us. So it is one of the things that I have indicated in my letter to the Minister. One of the reasons that I've indicated that is because we need a lot of capital investment across the board in Wales in order that we sustain and get appropriate placements for these children. It needs to be a proper placement. It's no good just having temporary. And as Claire said about our model around it's a therapeutic model. One of the things we need to be really clear of as we go into we're going into poverty here in Bridgend. We have a lot of residents going into poverty. We know that the demand on our service provision is going to be increased, for want of a better word. We need to ensure that we can manage these young people and give them the most assistance and give them the most opportunities to develop well as they grow older. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gebby. Councillor Williams, would you like to come back, or are you content with the responses?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Thanks very much. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we now move to page 37 to 39, and it would be remiss, as I said in my opening remarks, not to refer to the CIW inspection of children's services, and as well as the risks going forward, which you've highlighted in the report. Obviously, they've referred to serious concerns which emerged from the performance evaluation inspection of children's services, and I'm cognizant of the fact that this report is going to full council before the relevant subject overview and scrutiny committee has scrutinised the annual report in detail. But I would also remind members to bear in mind that it will be considered in another forum. And that isn't within the reporting period, which is before us today. However, I would like to give you, Claire and Councillor Gebby and the leader, the opportunity of making some general comments on the key findings, i.e. how is BCBC working towards improving upon some of the weaknesses which were identified in ensuring that practitioners hear the voice of the child in care provision, that social care records are completed in a timely manner, how we increase trust and confidence in BCBC safeguarding arrangements, and how we are managing some of the workforce pressures to which you've already referred, and how we are ensuring that performance management and quality assurance systems are fully aligned. So yeah, can I ask the Cabinet Member and the Director to make some general comments, and then I'll ask members if they have any additional general questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know the leader does want to come in, but it was with reference to the last bit.
Yes, apologies. So it's Councillor Amanda Williams's question around those moves for children between schools and placements. And I'm just going to say we'll undertake some more analysis of that for members, and also just confirm the data and whether that includes planned and unplanned, or only unplanned moves, because often, for example, one move of a school can be because we've secured permanency for a child, and that can be a very positive outcome. For example, if they've been reunited with their birth family or birth family members, and if that results in a permanent home and permanency for that children, that can actually be a positive. That is a very different outcome to where, for example, the placement has broken down and that's unplanned, and that child has been placed in a different setting or with a different family. So we'll try and do some analysis around that. But notice that actually, in terms of school places, there's been some improvement in the statistic, and then in terms of 3 or more places, then that has actually declined. So we'll undertake some more analysis around that, Chair, because I think it's an important area for us. The continuity and stability is obviously important, very important to children. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor David. I'll pass on to others now to answer my.
I'm going to answer your question, Councillor Williams, and that is in front of me. I have the improvement plan that will be going to scrutiny, but just of note is the majority of what's on our improvement plan we've actually discussed here today. Part of that is around the workforce challenges. It's about practitioners. It's about WICIS. So there's various there's a big whole raft, and you will get loads and loads of explanation in scrutiny, but I really don't want to go into it too much today, because otherwise I think we might get detracted slightly. But sure, I look forward to speaking to all members of this.
I appreciate that, but clearly, as the annual report is going to council before scrutiny occurs, it would be remiss of us as a corporate overview and scrutiny committee not to refer to it. So are there any other comments on this particular item? No. Okay. So therefore, we will move to look into the future key priorities for 22-23, which is on page 40 and 41, and they're also replicated at 4.10 in the cover report. Are there any questions on future and key priorities? No. From my perspective, clearly, I don't think anyone would have any issue with any of the key priorities which you've identified, but I would ask, what are the risks of not achieving them? So, as I mentioned, we're over 5 months now into this year's reporting period. What initial assessment have you made on whether or not you're on your way to achieving each one of these priorities, and which of these continue to present the most challenging to accomplish for the local authority?
Yeah, I was just going to say very quickly that I think workforce underpins everything. That is our biggest challenge currently, and actually to secure all the other priorities and work streams is entirely dependent upon us securing that stable workforce, or stable as it can be, and recruiting and retaining staff. So that is the fundamental challenge, and we're responding to that challenge in every way that we can. But also, you will have seen through the report, and hopefully through the answers we've given today, that we are making progress around those priorities. So they're not completely new priorities. Actually, they're priorities that have been priorities from previous years. most of them, but we are making that progress on them all, and we monitor them very, very carefully. There's a huge degree of monitoring on a daily basis, not just a weekly and a monthly basis, and where we identify additional pressures, we obviously respond to those as quickly and as fully as we can. But all of that is obviously with the ultimate objective and priority of keeping people safe and well, whatever age they are or wherever they are in the county borough, is supporting and keeping safe our most vulnerable citizens, and that is obviously a golden thread through the plan is outcomes and support for those individuals as well. So, thanks.
Chair, if I may add, just from a professional perspective, workforce, as I've said throughout, and as the leader has set out politically, is the key risk. There will be other risks to achieving these priorities. These priorities, whilst they're the priorities for this year, I would say that most of these priorities are longer term priorities as well. We've already referred to the fact we've got a 3-year improvement plan for children's social care. I think what you would expect to see in future reports is us to build on these priorities, not a whole new set of priorities. But there will, when you're sort of analysing the risks to delivery, there's lots of things in society. Nobody could have predicted COVID, although perhaps they could. We'll see what national inquiries say around those matters. But the Deputy Leader has already referred to the cost of living crisis, the impact on our social care providers, who are seeing significant potential increases in their energy bills, and the impact of all of that. As you see increased demand and some unexpected issues which inevitably emerge when you're operating in key frontline services, what we need within our arrangements is resilience. And I think that's one of I think the key risks is that in order to operate, in order to meet statutory duties consistently and well, you need that bit of headroom, don't you? And the bit of headroom to be doing both the operational things well and to be progressing those strategic developments. And I think not just Bridgend, but probably across Wales, social care and health services haven't got that resilience at the moment. And we've been in senior meetings with health colleagues where a lot of that is reflected back to us from an adult's perspective, and Jackie will add to that. We're certainly seeing that in the children's world. So yes, these are my professional opinion, the right set of priorities. We need the people to do it, but we need a bit of headroom, and we need things to sort of progress and not to bring us further challenges, because we know that there's significant challenges we're facing at the moment.
Thank you, Jackie.
I'll just add a few bits more, really. So not to repeat about the workforce, because we can't do anything without the workforce, and that's at all levels, really, from our frontline workers to our team leaders and our managers, to be able to implement some of our initiatives. Really, what we have started to put together and very clear across the directorate is some infrastructure around our performance and quality assurance. And our new planning groups, which got approval at CMB very recently, will now start to be implemented and will provide us the structure in terms of the items that are mentioned here. In terms of the health board are introducing a new operating model, and that is only just starting to appoint to the very senior roles in that. So that will see us developing new relationships with different senior colleagues in the health board, for us to be able to progress our integration agenda. There's a significant programme in Wales called the 6 Goals programme around our support for health and social care, with particular focus around our ability to discharge out of acute sites. That is going at a fast pace within the health board, being led by the health board, but the local authorities across the region are very much part of that and a leading part of some of the work streams around that. So the only way that you'll be able to support some of the the new things that we'll need to do around integration is to have that transformational change really, and that's going to take longer than a year to order for us to implement and then embed to actually see direct delivery.
Do you mind if I add a comment, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course, Councillor Kirby.
And that is about our agency workforce, and we're very heavily reliant on agency workforce at the minute. And if I was still practicing social care, I would be working for an agency, and I certainly wouldn't be working for a local authority, because the vast sums of money that you can make now is extortionate. I'm very conscious that if I went to work for an agency for 6 months, I could earn more than a group manager in VCBC, which is not acceptable. That we just can't sustain that level of finance. So I think one of the risks that we need to look at going forward is the finance that we have available to us as well. Thanks very much, Chair.
Really helpful. Thank you all for your comprehensive response to that. Councillor Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask quickly on the workforce, because it makes mention of tapping into international workforce to bring them here to do the work so that we're not reliant on the agency, etc., etc. But if we are facing the same issues that are across the board, across Wales, will we be tapping into an international workforce that other authorities will be tapping into as well, because obviously they face the same issues that we do? And how are we going to do that so that we basically win that race and we get that staffing here? Or is this just going to be a bit of a non-starter really, and we're going to be wasting time chasing an international workforce that others are chasing as well? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bledsoe. Yes, indeed, other authorities are looking at international recruitment as well. However, it's not all a loss. We have actually appointed through that process already. And I would suggest that it needs to be a wider context, because if we can't appoint across Wales and we haven't got those graduates coming through, we won't have social workers going forward. And currently it's only 40% of places are taken as at social work degree level. So that gives you an indication of the problems that we have across Wales. And a personal opinion is that we need to go back to teachers in, I think it was the 90s, and we had a massive influx of teacher graduates because we put the money there, but that was governments, of course, and we need to do the same thing here in Wales. Indeed, we would need to do that across the UK. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Bledsoe, are you satisfied with that reply?
I am, yes. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Gebby, because that makes sense as well.
Thank you very much, both. Do we have any other contributions on future key priorities?
Chair, can I just make a quick point, because I think it's right that the question is asked by Councillor Black. So, and there's a risk for all the actions, but that's not the only action. And in fact, it's not our most important action. Our most important action around workforce is growing our own. And that has been very successful. Over 16 new starters. I call them starters because some of them work within the organisation, but not as social workers, but starting in those new roles and those new journeys within the organisation. And what we've said is through the critical incident and through the different groups is if we get more candidates and they're quality candidates, then we will grow our own scheme to reflect that, because that has to be the key to long-term success to this programme is growing our own, investing in the future. And we know from previous cohorts of that scheme that there's a very high level of retention because we've shown commitment and we've invested in those workers. So we are setting a lot of store by that because we know from previous cohorts that it can be and will be successful at that amongst the range of other options. Thanks, Chair. Thank
you very much, Leader. Moving on then to how people are shaping our services, and that's pages 42 to 47. Do members have any questions on this set? This section of the report? Okay, unsurprisingly, I do have a question. I'd just like to congratulate you on the number of compliments which you received in comparison to the number of complaints. It's often too easy for people to complain, isn't it, about service delivery, and rare for someone to take the time to provide a compliment due to people's high expectations. However, on this section, have you already seen positive results from the appointment of the corporate parenting and participation officer? And what has been done thus far to implement improvements following the feedback which you received from the care leavers and people first focus groups?
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, for the comments, that it's positive to see the compliments. It is, isn't it? And also I'd like to give some assurance the vast majority of complaints are resolved informally before they progress through to formal processes as well. We will have a complaints annual report coming forward. In terms of the corporate parenting and participation officer, we couldn't write too much in this annual report because he did remind me the other day he only started it in May, because I've started to put forward some of the work that he's doing as evidence for lots and lots of things, and it can't be put forward yet because it's for this financial year. But yes, we are starting to see already really positive impact. Not last week, the week before, I was interviewing for a group manager, and there was a panel of young people who he brought together, who were equal, not appointing officers, but neither was I, part of the selection process, and they've been part of a number of selection processes, and we're really enjoying that aspect of becoming involved. We've got children from that cohort of young people who are going to be meeting with the First Minister as part of the Care Experience Children Ambassadors programme. And what we are trying to do with Steve Berry's work is to make sure it impacts at every level. So strategically and in governance terms, hopefully our Cabinet Corporate Parenting Committee will feel refreshed and energised. We've got a board that sits beneath that, which will be chaired by the Deputy Leader, which will ensure that there's an approach to corporate parenting from across the whole of the council, and indeed partners, not just from Social Services Directorate. And then in terms of that participation and engagement side, what Steve is doing is ensuring that there's mechanisms for reaching out to all our care and experience children, and giving them all the opportunity to become engaged and involved. So really good work. Obviously, in terms of the issues they raised when I met with them, it's a you said we did approach. So there's no point in them telling us stuff if we don't do anything about it. And similarly with the People First group, I've got to say, meeting with People First is always a pleasure, because that's an example of where engagement involvement has been sustained over a long period of time. So you really see the benefits, and I'll embarrass one of Jackie's group managers in that they were talking about the engagement work he'd done to develop the learning disability plan locally, and they described it as the best piece of engagement work that they'd ever experienced in their long history of being engaged in pieces of work. So that plan is being driven by People First. There'll be a co-chair of the local planning group that delivers that chair with the person with lived experience. And so when we get it right, it's really a joy. What we've got to make sure is that that's the case right across the piece and for everybody we work with.
Great, that's positive news, and congratulations to Jackie and your team. Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to ask a question on page 43, where it says 4,500 secondary school children engaged in a survey work to set wellbeing baselines for council's review of place efficiency. I was wondering if there was any plans to engage with children in primary schools too, particularly the older children. I'm looking at year 5 and year 6, because as they are getting ready to go to comprehensive schools and everything, they've also struggled as a result of COVID and missed out a lot. And it would be nice to get an idea of their feelings in everything, as well as just focusing on the older age groups. So I just wondered if there's plans to engage with these groups. Thanks.
Councillor Williams, I'm sure there will be. This survey formed part of the place efficiency assessment, which will be progressing to Cabinet in the autumn term. Andrew Thomas is on well-deserved annual leave, and he would be able to tell you exactly what those plans were. So if we may come back to you with that. But I have to say that in terms of that engagement with the secondary school pupils, what a fantastic baseline that provides to have that level of engagement, and some really important messages in there about the impact of the lockdowns on secondary age pupils, but I'll leave that for when the place efficiency report comes forward, and I'll come back to you with the plans once Andrew's back from leave.
Thank you, Claire. Amanda, are you happy with that? Councillor Williams, rather?
Yeah. Yes, thanks.
Okay, that's great. Is there anything further then on how people are shaping our services? Members would indicate. I can't see any hands raised, so therefore we'll move to the section on promoting the well-being of those we help on pages 48 to 71. Would you indicate if you have any specific questions on this section? I suppose from my perspective, Claire and team, what I was thinking throughout reading this section of the report is when you refer to next steps on all of the different quality standards, I was like a broken record really in writing my notes in saying, well, what have you done on this, 5 months into the reporting period? And I could have asked you all of those questions on every single quality standard and we'd be here until midnight. But potentially it would be useful for the committee to have perhaps a written update on where we are, a status update on each of the next steps and how you've achieved them. Is this something which you could provide to the committee in due course?
Thank you very much, Chair, for the question. The what next steps reflect what's in the corporate plan for the directorate, and then the directorate business plan as well. So I think it would be relatively straightforward to share those documents with scrutiny committees as we monitor them throughout the year. And then if there's any specific areas you want us to commit to committee to talk about in a report form, we can do that, obviously.
Sure, it's just from my perspective, you say, for example, quality standard 1, you said you're going to co-produce a plan for the next 5 years. I was going to ask, where are we currently with the process? Quality standard 2, you mentioned the implementation of the BCBC focused adult mental health strategy. Quality standard 3, you mentioned the Wales safeguarding procedures, etc., etc., etc. So I think it would just be useful to have that in written format. It'll allow you to provide a more comprehensive reply, and it will save a great deal of time in rehearsing some of this in committee. So if that's possible, that would be excellent.
Yeah, absolutely progress. Thank you, Chair.
Great. So we'll go to Councillor Heidi Bennett now.
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much next steps. It's a query, I guess, on the on page 70 in regards to how well did we do with general foster carers, and obviously there's quite a good number of inquiries coming in, but the conversion to foster carers approved is only 4. Now I know not everybody will progress and not everybody will be appropriate, but what are the timelines for taking people through from inquiry to foster care being approved? What kind of timescales are we looking at?
It takes about 6 months, and I think one of the things we're always cognizant of and looking to improve the effectiveness of is whether there's any way with it those end-to-end timescales can be more timely, if I put it that way. Obviously there's some very critical and important checks that need to take place, and all of those things are right and proper, and you would never want to unduly rush these processes in order for the assessments to take place, all the information to come back in terms of prospective foster carers, but we're always looking at the end-to-end times to see whether there are improvements that can be made. For those of you going to the marketplace event this afternoon, there will be a stand there for Bridgend Fostering Service, and whilst you yourselves as councillors can't become foster carers in Bridgend, there'll be lots of information you can share perhaps with friends and wider family who can, because it's a really key area for us. But we also recognise, as I've referred to that bit to Welsh Government a number of times, that we need more support for our foster carers if we are going to grow that cohort significantly. And that bid that we put in does build on successful schemes elsewhere in Wales, and we would hope to be successful, and we would hope that would have an impact on our recruitment and retention.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Bennett, are you content with the response?
Thank you, yes.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Are there any other comments or questions on the section on promoting the well-being of those we help? No. So if there aren't any further questions on that, we'll move to prevention and wellbeing service on pages 72 to 82. From my perspective, similarly, I would appreciate a written reply on the status updates of each quality standards next steps. So there's a similar comment from me with regards to the previous section. But apart from that, I don't have any other comments myself. So do any members have any questions or comments? No? Okay. We therefore move to how we do what we do, pages 83 to 91. Members have any comments to make on this section? Okay, well, I have a few comments, if I may. On page 85, you refer to supporting qualifying pathways to careers, recruitment, apprenticeships, growing our own social workers and the social services practitioner award, which we've already referred to. So it's now autumn 2022 when you say that you will have produced a revised first year in practice programme for the newly qualified social workers joining the local authority. So what changes have you made, unless I've missed what you've already said in previous remarks, but it has been quite a lengthy meeting and perhaps I've missed what you've said there.
Thank you, Chair. And we were just reflecting, probably would be helpful is to give you a 6-monthly update on all the standards and a sort of halfway through the year, and then that would demonstrate that progress or otherwise against everything that we said that we would do. In terms of the first year of practice, obviously important that that's in place now, because that's when the post-qualifying students are coming into Bridgend. Really, it's about going back to the very high standards of practice that Bridgend had pre-COVID pandemic. Bridgend did actually win a social care accolade some years ago for its first year in practice programme. But there were some challenges around the pandemic, which meant that we weren't delivering that as well as we should have. But we know what good looks like, and that's now being implemented again as it should be. Really pleased to say, testing it out in reality. I met one of Jackie's staff the other day who's still in that consolidation phase, and he was absolutely glowing about his experience here since he started back in June, and dare I say it, contrasted with that of another authority of whose name I won't mention. But that was really good to be able to test that out in reality in terms of newly qualified social workers' experience of joining us. So yeah, it's going back to getting the basics right, making sure we've got the practice educators linking in, making sure there's regular opportunities for newly qualified students to come together with their peer groups, making sure they're getting the right support and supervision and induction from day one in the services. And I'm pleased to say in that circumstance, particularly, that it was definitely happening, and we've got to make sure and assure ourselves that that's happening across the board all the time. But that's what's happening in that regard.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I now want to sort of address the elephant in the room, I suppose, and it's already been addressed really by Councillor Gebbie in previous remarks, and that is obviously the pressure on financial resources. And you note on page 88 and 89 that there will be significant budget pressures going forward, and that ADSS Cymru has equated that to around a £5 to £6 million budget shortfall in Bridgend, and that was before, I suppose, we really knew what the inflationary pressures which we will face going forward, which will only add to these budgetary pressures. You've noted in the report that as part of the 23-24 budget setting process, the Directorate has identified a total of £12.8 million of budget pressures, and you say that this is primarily down to the national living wage increases, the cost due to the older people population increasing cost of out-of-county placements, learning disabilities, supported living cost pressures, etc., etc. Now, it'd be useful to gain, I think, an indication of a more detailed breakdown of where these £12.8 million financial pressures sit within your directorate. I note from the pages that you have additional earmarked reserves totaling £5.5 million, which will be used. But there appears, therefore, to be a £7.2 million shortfall. So I guess this is a political question for the leader and deputy leader, in that what initial discussions have been had on where this sum is going to be found from. I know you're putting pressure, Councillor Gebbie, on the Welsh Government to provide an uplift in the local government settlement to address some of these challenges. But if we don't get a significant uplift in our local government settlement, where are we going to find this money from to adequately meet our statutory services and wellbeing and prevention priorities going forward? I guess what I'm asking is, where will the administration seek to cut discretionary services in other policy areas, even though, of course, discretionary services can prevent people needing statutory intervention, but surely some consideration would have been made at this level at this time in the financial year on how we will meet our statutory obligations in social services given the budgetary pressures.
We will meet our statutory obligations irrespective of finance until the next financial year, Chair. What I would say is that Welsh Government need to put their money where their mouth is. Some of this policy determination is from them. They actually need to fund that requirement, which is one of the reasons why I am putting immense pressure on the Minister to support us. I've actually invited her to come to Bridgend, because if she wants to have a discussion about this is Welsh Government legislation, this is their policy, they need to fund it. So I'm very clear about that. We will not be cutting services, we can't afford to. And the reality is, the more of those pre-statutory functions that we can provide, the better that it is for the outcomes for our residents as well. So I think we need to be really careful. And we're also not very clear at this point in time what our budget settlement is going to be like. And it's not going to be until just prior to Christmas that we actually receive it. So I wouldn't be running to not provide any service provision, is my political response, Chair.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Gebbie, but perhaps from a professional perspective, without treading on any political toes, Claire, clearly a £7 million shortfall will be a significant budgetary pressure on your directorate. So can you comment at all on where those budgetary pressures will sit within your directorate and the impact on service delivery?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's an important one. I think I said right at the start that one of the deliberate lines within the statutory duties of the Director of Social Services is to advise on the resources required to deliver services. And I think I said right at the start that I've never been so worried about the alignment between the finances required to deliver statutory services and the availability of finance. I've referenced the challenges that we're seeing coming through from the care home sector, for example, because they're at that time of year now where they're receiving their energy bills, and I'm sure you can imagine, because you see some of the headlines in the media about the sort of cost increases that they are potentially seeing. So we're seeing three things really. We're seeing the increase in need and demand. We're seeing, massive workforce challenges, and I'm just thinking, as I'm thinking about the final tweaks to this version of the council, that I need to be mentioning workforce pressures alongside those other pressures there in terms of this section of the report. And the cost of workforce is increasing, be it through agency or be it through things that the council is having to do itself through market supplement, etc. And then clearly the unit cost of provision is significantly increasing, whether we provide ourselves or whether we provide via third party commissioned services. So all those three elements are increasing. I have to advise on statutory services, but equally the wellbeing and prevention, because if we cut the wellbeing and prevention, more services and there will be more need for statutory provision. So I've been asked to look at where I can reduce these pressures. I am really struggling to do that. We did benefit from a significant earmarked reserve. At the moment, that earmarked reserve is fully committed and being spent in year because of the pressures that we've alluded to, the cost of agency, the cost of placement. And when you look at the period 4 report in terms of the budget position in year, it's really challenging. Now, hopefully that will improve in year. We traditionally receive grant money late in the year in social services, don't we? But in terms of a recurring budget position, in my almost 30 years in public services. I know it's hard to believe. I've never been so worried, and I've been in senior positions through austerity, etc. But it's very hard to see how we can reduce significantly those pressures that we cite in this report.
Thank you to you both for that honest assessment. Councillor Martin-Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it is worrying sitting here listening to the Director providing us with that information regarding budget management. Chair, could I make the point? I think the pain of making budget decisions rests with full council, and perhaps it could be a consideration of us in this committee to also formally write to Welsh Government to support the Deputy Leader in her aims then to raise issues which clearly affect the whole of Wales and not just the county borough of Bridgend. You've quite rightly raised the issue of a shortfall of potentially 7.2 million. I am sure this committee and many other committees will be revisiting this issue as we move further into the financial year. But I want to make the point that the pain of meeting our budget commitments rests with us all, and it rests with all councillors. And again, I just want to reiterate perhaps a recommendation from us as a committee is that we also write to the Welsh Minister to support the Deputy Leader in what she's trying to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and I don't have any opposition to your suggestion there, and we'll discuss our conclusions and recommendations just after we finish discussing the report. Are there any further questions on this particular section? Okay, therefore, we move to the final section, which is page 90 and 91. Are there any questions or comments from members on our partnership work in political and corporate leadership, governance and accountability? No, I see no further questions, so I'd like to thank the leader, deputy leader, corporate director, and Jackie and all invitees. You may leave the meeting at your convenience. I very much thank you for all of the comprehensive and detailed responses which you provided the committee today.
Thanks very much, Chair. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, members and scrutiny officers, we now move to consideration of our conclusions and recommendations. We'll now summarise the key points. I'm going to call a short break. We've been in the meeting for 2 hours, and I know some members have medical conditions which they need to address, and I think a short break would be appropriate at this time so that the scrutiny officers can pull together some of the conclusions and recommendations from our detailed analysis of the report. So we will reconvene at 12:10. Thanks very much.